Well, hey there, and welcome everyone to Legally Blissed Conversations, and a very warm welcome today to my friend and colleague, Amy Gardner. My name is Susie Hickson, and I'm a trademark attorney for about 20 years, and I'm the founder of the Legally Blissed community. So today, I am so thrilled to welcome Amy and to discuss with her unique journey as a woman lawyer. So let me just tell you a little bit about her. So Amy works with law firms and corporations to reengage teams and help them thrive. She also works with lawyers to advance or transition them in their careers through one-on-one coaching. And Apochromatik, which is the company that she founded, is the industry leading attorney mastermind. Amy's work with teams and lawyers draws on her unique experience as a former big law litigator, partner at a mid-sized Chicago law firm, and dean of students at the University of Chicago Law School. She's a frequent speaker for professional organizations and bar associations on career, leadership, and team development topics. Her expertise has been featured in media and podcasts, including ABA publications, Law 360, Corporate, Glassdoor, Monster, NBC, Be That Lawyer, Exhibit A, Attorney, Hustle and Flow, and The Resilient Lawyer. Welcome again, Amy. I am so thrilled you're here and to learn more about you and your journey.
Well, thank you for having me back. I appreciate it.
She's also an avid Diet Dr. Pepper fan. So she's like, before we started, she's like, hold up, I have to get my Diet Dr. Pepper. So
yes, I don't drink coffee and I don't drink soda before 11 a.m. So I have these parameters, but yes, GDP is an important part of my day.
I love you even have an acronym for it. That's good. That means that you guys are like this, right?
Yes, yep.
All right, so let's go back a few years. I'm curious. I want to learn about your journey and why you originally decided to go to law school.
So I actually decided to go to law school in second grade when Mrs. Fraser had us draw what we were going to be when we grew up. And I was not much of an artiste. And so I looked around and realized that a lot of the little girls around me were drawing nurses. So they were doing the Red Cross symbol. And I actually have memories of thinking I don't want to deal with blood, and deciding that I clearly was just going to be a lawyer and drawing scales, like the scales of justice. Yeah. That's what I drew in second grade.
That's adorable. I love that.
So that was my great career selection process, which I do not recommend and is not what we use with our clients today, but it worked out all right. And then all throughout elementary school, high school, I was in speech contests, debate, mock trial, did all those things. And my dad actually always used LA Law as my reward, where if I got a perfect score on spelling tests, or if I had to, in the pre-test on Monday, if I didn't and had to take a post-test on Friday, before LA Law started, I had to be getting all the words correct. And if they were all getting correct, I could stay up and watch LA Law when he was quizzing me. But if he quizzed me and I was missing any, I didn't get to watch LA Law.
Wow.
So that was
How old were you when you were into LA Law?
Pretty young. It was not a show that now looking back, I think what parent would allow their young, impressionable child to watch LA Law with them on Thursdays? But my dad did. And so that was that. I really got into the whole, I wanted to be Grace Van Owen from a very early age.
That's cool.
And so then when I got to college, I double majored in English and political science.
Okay.
And which really qualifies you to go to law school and work on campaigns.
Yeah.
So I worked.
I'm going to law school, right?
Yes, right. So I was secondary ed, and so I didn't do my student teaching, but otherwise I think I had finished all the secondary ed requirements. But I decided to work on political campaigns. I had done an internship at the White House in college and really loved that experience, but knew I didn't want to stay in politics long. But I did roughly 2 years in Iowa politics and then went to law school.
Okay. So you did have a little break before you went to law school between undergrad and law school.
Yeah,
it sounds like you had some really solid experience. You had something kind of lined up. what advice would you give to young people who are thinking about going to law school, but are thinking about taking a little time off before they do that?
I 100% recommend it. I think even if you are doing something that does not appear to be directly related, like say you're waiting tables, or I had a student who was in a band and like traveled, actually a couple students who were in bands and like traveled around in a van trying to get gigs. But whatever you're doing, I think if it is helping you learn professional skills and helping you mature, I just think there is something not as great about being in a position where your first real job is working in a law firm and having an assistant, right? You're better off, I think, if you can wait tables or work in an office. I mean, really, after the campaign cycle ended, I temped at an insurance company where I learned what environment I didn't want to work in, right? I think there's good things that come from any of it, but if it's either lay on the couch or go to law school, like that's not going to be as helpful. But I do think really doing any sort of work, getting experience, growing up a little bit, having a break from school will help you go to law school, having things in a different perspective, being able to keep them in a different perspective. And that's valuable.
I think that your brain, I think that we don't really fully understand how our brains aren't super mature at 22. Yeah. Especially now, you know, I went straight to law school after undergrad, and I look back and I think, you know, I think I could have benefited by taking a couple of years, having some work experience. I kind of feel like maybe I lacked some maturity that might have been great, you know, as a law student, as well as in a law firm environment. And I also like look at some of the students and think back when I was in law school, how just a few of them who had been out for a while and had gone back to law school, they just really seemed like they had their shit together.
Yeah. Although I have to say, like, when I was a dean of students, I worked with lots of students who said, gosh, I wish I hadn't taken so much time off. You know, the people who've gone straight through are younger and they're able to stay up late and they have fewer outside obligations. So I think whatever your path is, your path is. Yeah. But if people are just considering it, I do think it can be helpful.
Right. It's not always helpful to look back and be like, oh, I should have done it a different way. Right. But it is great when you have this information and you can kind of use it and have it in your arsenal going forward as you're making your decisions about law school.
For sure. Yeah. And I think too, you also don't know what the economy is going to look like in 3 years. And so I think a lot of that is, you know, some of it is just, a lot of that piece is luck of the draw, right? And so maybe staying out would have helped you come out in a different economy, and maybe that would have been horrible. So you just don't know.
You just never know, right? Like, what if you started law school in 2005 and you came out in 2008, right? But 2008 probably would have been a great time to like go into law school. So you can't, it's hard to predict, you know, the economy. And if we did, we would all have stocks and, you know, not even be doing the law school thing.
And crystal balls. Yeah.
And crystal balls, right? But we don't. And we make the best decisions with the information that we have. So, okay. So I want to know about your law school experience. So you were Miss LA Law Girl. Like you were into this, I bet did you have like a Scales of Justice necklace and like?
I didn't have a necklace, but my dad did give me a Black's Law Dictionary for college graduation. So
no pressure, but you're going to law school, kid.
Right. And it's like my dad had an associate, like he'd gone to technical college. So he hadn't, you know, didn't know any lawyers and like that. But I was very involved in, you know, moot court, the clinic, law review, like I did all the things. But when I got to law school, I mean, I had gone to a lovely college run by lovely people. I had very nice professors, but when you walk in and all of the people who have gone to, you know, the law schools that are undergrads that are a little bit more well-known than Luther College in Decorah, Iowa, it's quite intimidating. And I was very sometimes more shaken by some of the and like no one can help where they went to college, right? They're allowed to say where they went to college, but there was some behavior, I would say, by some of my law school classmates that wasn't cool, and that shook my confidence. And so I spent a lot of time thinking I had barely squeaked in, and that any second somebody was going to figure out the mistake and I would be shown the door. And so I spent a lot of time with other students who had gone to less well-known undergrads or less highly ranked undergrads. And some of them are still my best friends today. And we all turned out just fine.
Yeah.
Right. We're all fine. And I think I wish I had known that at the time.
Yeah. So it sounds like, I mean, I could be inaccurate about this, but were you dealing with a little bit of imposter syndrome?
Absolutely. I didn't even know what it was called, but it had a raging case of it. For sure. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't think, I swear, like I look back also and I'm like, I definitely have had this basically in made, significant part of my life, even before it has had a name to it. Right.
Yeah, I had a colleague that I worked with on a political campaign who ended up being a U.S. congressman, and who will remain nameless. And he actually said to me when we were talking about before I started law school, he said, "So where are you going?" And I said, "The University of Chicago." And I got into. And he said, "Where else did you get in?" And I told him, and he actually looks at me at a backyard barbecue in Iowa, and says to me, "I didn't know you were smart." And I was thinking, like, what? Like, I don't know what this means. And so when I got to Chicago, I asked the dean of admissions at one of those Domino's Pizza kind of study hours, and I think I may have shared this with you before. I said to him, "Why did you admit me?"
Yeah.
And he said, he said, "I don't know. I'm sure I had a reason." And like, that was not a helpful response, right? But also, I didn't know enough about the imposter syndrome and about my own confidence to be able to fix it for myself. I was still looking for somebody else to tell me I was good enough. And that doesn't happen, right?
No.
If you're always looking for other people to give you that positive reinforcement, you're going to be looking a long time.
Right.
And so I spent a lot of time really feeling like, gosh, I'm not so sure about this. Am I really going to be able to be a good lawyer if I just barely squeaked in? What if they figure it out?
When did you start kind of stepping into stepping into more confidence? Was it later on when you became a practicing lawyer? Was it when you became dean? Was it like the day you graduated from law school?
So I think that being on it. I think it's always a process. But when I got to Skadden, it was tremendously helpful because at Skadden there was a partner there, Chuck Smith, who he said, our job is to help you learn how to walk through walls. We want lawyers who are going to wake up every morning and want to walk through walls for their clients, and we're going to teach you how. And that was so empowering. And just being at a big firm with a great name and with a very high level of excellence was really helpful for me to feel much more confident. And I worked with awesome people. I worked with men and women who were just really at the height of their profession. And it made me feel like I had to up my game, certainly, but also when you're working with people who are such phenomenal lawyers and you're in the same room and they are looking to you for advice and guidance and they are willing to invest in you and teach you, that was really helpful for me in terms of feeling confident about myself as a lawyer and what I bring to the table.
I love that. I want to go back to law school for just a second.
Sure.
For just a minute, and then back to your experience at Skadden. Did you have any like favorite classes in law school? And I guess I can go ahead and dive into another question related to law school. I'm curious about like when you got out of law school, did you do on-campus interviews? Were you pretty much ready to go into Skadden at that point?
So I would say two favorite classes. I genuinely had it was a hard experience in a lot of ways, but also very positive experience. I mean, the University of Chicago Law School, and I think any law school experience could be this way for people, but for me, it was very much a reset button, right? I had gone to a perfectly nice school, but I had scholarships that required me to stay in Iowa, and I stayed in Iowa and met some nice people. I met my husband in college, had some very good experiences, very supportive faculty, but if I had not gone to a law school outside of Iowa, if I had not gone to a top law school, it wouldn't have enabled me probably to have the experiences that I had.
Right. I think that's something people need to consider, right? Like if they want to go into big law, they want to go work at a big firm. I've heard that you really should go summer, right, where you want to ultimately practice law.
Yeah, and I did not. I didn't know any of these things because I didn't know any lawyers, right? And so when I got to Chicago, I benefited from a great career services department, and some wonderful career counselors there, who really made a huge difference for me, and great faculty. One of those was Avner Mikva, who I had for a class on law in the executive branch, but I would have taken a class from Judge Mikva that involved him like reading the back of soup cans. I mean, he was just particularly as somebody who was had worked in Democratic politics and coming to a law school known for a conservative bent. Judge Mikva was he had been Bill Clinton's White House counsel, chief judge on the DC circuit, and a congressman. And so he had very clear political views and did not shy away from vibrant debate, I would say. And so I love Judge Mikva. And then I also had a constitutional law class with a professor who ended up being president. And so those experiences were certainly, it's exciting to have when you have a professor whose name is on your textbook, that's exciting. But really, I think for me, the classes I enjoyed most were people who created a classroom atmosphere where you weren't just sitting there waiting to get called on and afraid. You felt like it was a discussion and you were picking apart laws and decisions and trying to understand them. David Strauss is a great one for that too, where I had 2 classes with him, and he would always say, you have to go back to the text and dig into the text and don't fight the hypothetical, right? All the things that you try to do as a law student rather than just facing the facts and just dealing with the situation you have in front of you. And so those are really, I would say, really valuable experiences that I had in law school.
Very cool experiences in law school, it sounds like.
Yeah, and one of my best friends still is actually several of my best friends still. I met in law school. One of them was in my 1L section. So some great friendships that I think you form in that intense experience where everyone is having to rethink how they approach reading and writing and analyzing.
For sure. So let me ask you, when you were getting ready for graduation, did you have your Skadden position lined up at that point when you graduated?
So I did, but I had 1L summer, I worked for a nonprofit criminal defense organization. Okay. 2L summer, I split between Skadden DC and another firm that has since been gobbled up, but was Swidler Berlin. And I knew pretty quickly that I loved Skadden DC. I really liked the environment, loved the people, loved the work. But I got married beginning my 3L year, and where I actually got honeymoon advice from the professor who would be our president, because we were going to Hawaii and had lots of experience.
Yeah, you can kind of talk about it.
So based on that, my now husband and business partner now, he was also from Iowa, and it just didn't make sense at that point in our lives for us to move to DC. And so we decided to change to Chicago. And I was having dinner with a professor and her husband as part of like one of those charity auction things. And we went around the table, and it was a few months before graduation. And I said, well, actually, I'm not sure what I'm going to do. And he said, what do you mean? And I said, well, I had this offer, but I think I want to stay in Chicago and I don't know how to do it. And he was a partner at Kirkland, Paul Garcia, and was so kind and reached out to Skadden Chicago, to a buddy there, and said, like, how would she go about doing this? And I went in and met with people at Skadden Chicago, and they switched my offer over, and they were great. But it was one of those things where I didn't know how you did it. And this very kind lawyer who had no reason to be helpful to me and made it possible for me to go to Skadden Chicago.
Okay, cool. Right. Sometimes we don't know. We just act like we can just ask. Right. Yeah. And this was, what year was this? When did you graduate?
I graduated in 2002. So, it was right after September 11th. And so a lot had changed in terms of what the economy was looking like, how people were feeling. But I was fortunate to have been a summer associate the summer of 2001 and then had that offer. So I graduated knowing where I was going to go.
That's good, right? Like there's always kind of that relief of knowing the next step. So you had, when you started at Skadden, what area of the law were you working in?
I was in the litigation group, which meant I did lots of internal investigations, I did some large defending large entities and class actions. And then I ended up doing a lot of IP litigation, which is not normally something that I think people necessarily associate Scott in Chicago with. But I ended up loving it. And it was a case that was generated out of another office. And it really gave me the opportunity to run a bunch of cases because I worked for a great partner who was happy to let me be overseeing all these cases. And the GC would always refer to me as the quarterback. And so I got to learn how to run a whole bunch of cases, manage a bunch of outside counsel or co-counsel, but and focus a lot on strategy, which was exciting.
Okay, that makes me really happy to hear because it seems like you had a good experience at Skadden. And a lot of people, you know, they start out in big law doing document review. You know what I mean? Granted, I graduated in 2003. So, you know, I was just like 1 year behind you, but I had friends who graduated that's all they did. I was like, how are you? Like, I just didn't understand how, I don't know. It just didn't seem like it'd be super fulfilling, but it seems like the experiences that you got to have at such an early part of your career at Skadden were pretty significant.
And I attribute a bunch of, part of that is just pure luck, right? And a lot of it is pure luck. I, at one point, shared an office when I was brand new. I shared an office with 2 other people, and they were doing very different things than I was. And we were all in the litigation group. We were all working for different partners. And I think I didn't appreciate at the time how much the type of cases you work on is going to vary based on the partners that you're primarily working for and the office of the firm that you're in. And just asking. There was a female partner who had sent out an email looking for people to help with a big pro bono project. And I had responded to that. And she came to a meeting that I was running. I got to know her a little bit through that. And then she walked down the hall one night and saw me in my office when she was going by a meeting, and then sent me an email 20 minutes later saying, I have this pitch. Do you want to come? And so, so many things go into your career that you can't plan. But I do think that raising my hand for the pro bono project, doing a decent job on it, those sorts of things were really helpful. But I think sometimes people think I'm not cut out for this, or I should not be in a big firm because they're bad. And the reality is any big firm is going to have people you don't want to work with. Any firm is going to have people you don't want to work with.
That's every firm, right?
Yeah, and every firm is going to have cases you don't really want to be on.
Right.
And so a lot of it is not so much about you as a lawyer. It's about what you're working on and who you're working with.
I think that there is a little bit of luck there, but I think you also kind of create your luck, right? Like you raised your hand when a pro bono matter came up, you know, but a lot of people would be like, I'm not doing that. You know what I mean? You raised your hand. So if you could give like a piece of advice to a new associate starting at any law firm, not just big law, what kind of nugget would you give them?
I think it's important to work hard and build relationships. And that second piece can be hard when you're trying to do all the things and get bill and try to have a life. But the reason I think one of the reasons that I had such a great experience at Skadden Chicago was really because of the relationships. And there was a guy named Ryan Rolfson, who now is a partner at Ropes and Gray, who was also from Iowa and just willing to give me the direct constructive feedback I needed. And Lee Gardner, who I worked with, who was a few years senior to me, who was willing to help me have a life outside work and balance and trade off tasks, and is a phenomenal writer as well. I learned so much from the 2 of them. And I think sometimes as new associates, we focus on the partners. And partners are important, but if you're a first year, you're doing a lot more for the 3rd and 5th years than you are directly with the partner, right?
Yeah.
And so
don't blow off the associates, right? The juniors.
No. I mean, the number of times still these years later, when I think about, there was a guy named Eric Gorman, who also is from Iowa City, Iowa, who I would go to him and say, I don't know what to do. And he would just help me. Yeah. And so those sorts of experiences, I had great things in terms of getting to be on the front of big briefs and things like that. That's great. But those relationships help make you the lawyer that you're going to be for the rest of your career. And I think that's really key beyond trying to make sure you get enough depths and that sort of thing that we often focus on.
Yeah, I think we have to be really careful as young lawyers to, to not always be just nose to the grindstone, like pumping out work, right? Like producing great work is important, but not necessarily at the expense of making those relationships. Many of us, underestimate how important that really is, making those relationships, especially early on in our careers.
Yeah,
and it's like you still kind of have relationships with a lot of these people, so that's really cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's a woman, Courtney Welton, who I supervised her when she was a summer associate, and now she's one of the top lawyers at Allstate. And she, one side of our business is on team and leadership development. Courtney is doing a discussion next week on AI and what leaders need to know about AI for our business, because we host these monthly programs for executives to come and discuss a topic.
Yeah.
And so Courtney is one of the discussion leaders, and literally I supervised her when she was a summer. And so you never know where people are going to end up. And so staying in touch with people from your law school class, and the people who cheered you on when you had no idea what you were doing, and the people who you cheered on when they had no idea what they were doing, those relationships have been so helpful, not just in terms of a career standpoint, but also just in terms of making for a richer life. So I think that investment in relationships, you can't go wrong if you do that.
Right. But I mean, what you're talking about is something different than having a mentor, it sounds like, right?
Right.
And did you have any type of mentor relationship when you were at Skadden, formally or informally? And if so, how did that compare to kind of the relationships that you're talking about? Kind of
I had a formal, Skadden had different mentoring programs. And I did participate in those, but there was a female partner that I worked for, Tina Chen, who was a great mentor to me in a lot of ways. And partially because she was fantastic at sensing when I was ready for the next thing, even though I didn't possibly consider that I might be ready. And so she was a great mentor.
Comfort zone, it sounds like. That's cool.
Yes, she would, you'd go to court and you'd go over the points with her. And she was always far more prepared than you as the associate who had written the talking points could possibly be. But she would say, I think you're ready. Why don't you take this? And that's how you'd find out you were doing the argument.
Yeah. And it sounds like you probably were ready.
Well, I hope so. But Tina definitely pushed and encouraged in a way that was really valuable. And just seeing how she built her career and her life was really a great experience. And I think, the other people that, I mentioned, like Ryan and Eric and Lee, all mentored me in their own ways, even though they were never appointed. I think women often think we have to be mentored by another woman, or we think that people have to look like us in order for them to be most valuable as a mentor. And certainly those relationships can be key, but I've always really benefited from all different kinds of mentors, and I'm really grateful for that.
Diverse mentors, and sometimes you have to seek out your own mentor relationship in a more organic way.
Yes, and I think mentoring programs can be great. We've worked with different law firms on their mentoring programs. I think they can be really beneficial, but often it can be just the person who you are wiped out at the end of the day, and you get in the elevator and they're there, and you're honest with them, and before you know it, they can become a mentor in a way that going to this sushi lunch the second Thursday of the month may not always lead to.
Sure. So how long were you at Skadden?
I was there about 6 years, and then I went from there to a mid-sized firm in Chicago, which at the time was called Ungrady & Harris. It was about 100 lawyers. And I started as an associate and then became a partner there. And now Ungrady is part of Nixon Peabody.
Okay. So it got absorbed by
after I left, they just didn't go on as Ungrady. Yeah.
After you left the big firm, you went to a medium-sized firm that then absorbed by yet another big firm.
Yeah, it's funny. But when I left, it was still Ungrady & Harris. And I went straight from there to go back to law school to be the dean of students at the U of C Law School.
Okay, so how long were you at that firm, the second firm?
Um, only, I want to say 3 years,
3 years.
maybe.
Okay. Okay.
So I started as associate, made partner, and left about less than a year later.
Okay. And is that when you went to become dean?
Mm-hmm.
So let's talk about that. That's kind of your, you know, I think unique journey, right? Going to be dean. You're actually dean of the school that you went to law school. So how did that?
Dean of students, yeah.
Dean of students,
Yeah,
yeah.
Dean of students, yeah.
How did that work out?
I loved it. I think for me, it was really an opportunity to partially to give back to the law school that had really, like I said, been such a reset button for me. But it was also an opportunity to me to help prepare students in a way that I sometimes wished I had been prepared. And so I really focused a lot on building leadership and professionalism skills. And I worked with a dean, Mike Schill, who is now the president of Northwestern. And Mike really gave me the freedom to do those, to come up with those initiatives, to implement them, to try new things, not because no one else had done them. We had no idea if they would work or not. And he very much was willing to let me try. And so that gave me some space and allowed me to be really creative in ways that I was sort of missing practicing law.
Okay, which you sort of needed something to kind of like scratch that creative itch.
Yeah.
So how long were you dean of students?
About 6 years.
6 years. Okay, that's pretty solid. So the work that you did there with leadership and the professional skills, is that ultimately translate into what you're doing now?
It does. It was so funny. I kept one of my deals with Mike Schill was that I wasn't asking for more budget money. I needed to get law firms to pay for these things that I was coming up with, and they did. And as I was talking with law firms and saying, we've created this new orientation that is really based on business school orientation. We'd like your support. Those sorts of things. They kept saying, oh, I wish we had this for our attorneys. And I kept thinking, well, you could, right? And so when I was deciding to leave the law school, I talked to several firms about doing professional development, leading those sorts of efforts. And I kept hearing from people that I could make more of a difference if I was actually working with many law firms rather than just working in one.
Yeah, for sure. So was that sort of what instigated you leaving and ultimately starting your own business?
It was. I mean, I knew that I had really developed a great network in terms of University of Chicago. And I had been actually president of the alumni club for the University of Chicago before I was the dean of students. So I had this great network in Chicago and with the U of C, but I wanted to broaden that more nationally. And so I actually took a role with the American Constitution Society, working with lawyers all across the country. Cool. And I did that while I finished my master's degree and got my coaching certification, and we started the business. And so that really enabled me to grow my network, see what was going on in a lot more legal markets, and have a better understanding when we launched Apochromatik, and both went full-time on it about 5 years ago.
5 years ago was when you launched?
Yeah. So we launched the business in 2016, but Keith and I both went full-time in 2018.
Okay. So I want to talk a little bit about your husband being involved in this. Yeah. I won't dig in too deep on that, but people go into businesses with their partners, right? My parents had a business together for their entire career. And so that's always intrigued me. When it's like my partner now, I can't imagine ever going into business with him. Like, I love him, but I think that I think we're too divergent in kind of our approaches to business, and that could be good. That could be good in some ways, right? And so, but I'm curious about like your husband's. What does he bring to the table, Amy? Like,
yeah. So I really come at things with the JD approach, right? And working in law school administration, law firms, public interest within the legal sphere.
Yeah.
Keith's perspective is the MBA perspective. So he had a long career in management, in municipal government, and he comes at, so when we were working with, say, a lawyer on career development or career transition, his perspective as someone who has negotiated comp again and again and again, and union contracts again and again and again, is very different than the perspective I bring to it. In terms of how I would coach somebody through negotiating for their comp. And we often do strategy days with clients together, where we just had one the other day with a client who is working on developing a book of business. And Keith's perspective and my perspective are very different. And so the clients are able to benefit from both of those. And when we work with a team together, Keith leads a lot of our team and leadership development in corporations and law firms. And so when we log on together with a group of some lawyers, some not, he is able to relate much more quickly to the non-lawyers, and I'm able to relate much more quickly to the lawyers. And I think it's just helpful to have that additional perspective and skill set. I mean, we are finishing tomorrow the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team certification. And from our DISC profiles, you can see, I mean, we have very different DISC, Colby, all the assessments tell you that we have very different perspectives, which I think clients ultimately really benefit from.
For sure, right? I think that there is a lot to be said for being able to approach situations from different perspectives. What advice would you give for someone who's thinking about starting a business or even a law firm with their partner?
I think you have to have separation and clear lanes. So I know that there are certain areas where this is going to be much more important to Keith than it is to me, and he is going to have much more knowledge and expertise in that area than I am, and vice versa. I think also we don't work from home. We have offices, and sometimes we do work from home, but we have separate offices that are about a 10-minute walk from our home. And so having that separation too, I think has been really helpful. And I think we worked together right after college. We worked on the same political campaign for a short time. And so that we have had, gosh, I don't know, I think our first job together was probably 30 years ago. Not 30 years ago, maybe 25 years ago, right? And so because we've had that experience, I think that made it much easier for us to be able to shift to working together. But yeah, it is not for everyone. I would say that the pros definitely outweigh the cons. And I think it can definitely enhance your business, and it can enhance your life outside that, to be able to have that flexibility that having your own business brings.
I have spoken with a few women on this podcast who have been in business or had law firms with their significant others, right? Like their life partners or whatever. And it's always intrigued me. So I always like to kind of dig into it a bit, like, ooh, tell me more stuff. So you all started Apochromatik in 2016. So tell me a little bit about the company. And of course, I'm a trademark lawyer, so I have to know about how you came up with the name. That's very important for me. So yeah.
Well, I had been doing, as I mentioned, I was doing my last couple of years at Skadden, and then also at Ungrady & Harris, I was doing a lot of IP litigation. And so from that, I knew we needed to have a name that could be trademarked, and quickly discovered that the name that I had been most excited about was one that we could not get the trademark on. And at that point, I was working full-time, finishing my master's, we're working on our coaching certifications, all those sorts of things were going on. And this is an area where I told Keith, please be in charge of this. Like, I trust you, come back with a name. And so Keith spent a lot of time and found there's a kind of lens called an apochromatic lens, and it helps eliminate distortions so that you can actually focus on the things you want to focus on. And so that we decided to tie something in with that. Keith is a pretty serious amateur photographer. He's had several shows, all that. So you cannot get a trademark for apochromatic as the same spelling as an apochromatic lens. However, if you change the last letter from a C to a K, then you can get the trademark. And so that's how we ended up with Apochromatik. And it ends up, though, that a lot of the things we do, a lot of our programs and offerings have names that around, like our Future and Focus Attorney Mastermind program, right? We often do clarity and consensus days with clients, for corporate clients, things like that. So a lot of work we do really is around helping people focus and work on the things that are going to advance the ball and really matter, rather than all the things we get distracted by. So it ended up actually making sense.
I think that that's really beautiful because you are, you have your trademark, right? And you can kind of create all this branding about creating clarity of focus and integrate Apochromatik into that. And it just makes sense. Like, even if you're like me and you're not a photographer and you don't understand it, like after you hear the word, you're like, yeah, okay, this makes a lot of sense. So I'm going to give you all an A+ on.
Thank you. I will give Keith that credit. I'll let him know.
Awesome. So what kind of clients do you all work with?
So it depends. So on the attorney focus side of our business, where we're working with lawyers who want to advance or transition in their careers, they really range from people who maybe are a first year associate up to law firm partners who are thinking about what's next.
A big spread. It's like
yeah. It makes it more, I think, fun for us. I mean, we've worked with a partner who had been he had made partner 27 years before he started working with us. So we really get to see the different career path options that are open to people.
Yeah.
And those folks come to us, either they know what kind of move they want to make and they need some help quickly to devise their job search strategy, and they're going to go off and execute it. Or they might join one of our 6-month attorney mastermind groups, or they might do just a one-on-one coaching package with us. So that's the attorney focus side. And then the other side of our business, we work with law firms and corporations on team and leadership development. So that might be a smaller firm where they really view everyone as a team member and they want everyone to work together as efficiently and effectively as possible, up through Fortune 50 companies where we might work with a specific, like the GC's direct reports as a team, or we might come in and run a leadership development program for a large law firm for all their attorneys who are about to make partner, or for a corporation's mid-level managers. So it really, because we have the two sides of the business, it really enables us to keep our thumb on what's going on in the legal market, but also really you can make a great impact working with one person on their career, and that's really rewarding. But then we also have the benefit of being able to see teams really turn things around, or just take them to the next level and help people like their jobs more and be more engaged and more productive.
I can tell that you like what you do, like, because when you talk about it, I see your face light up, which is really cool. I can tell that you like seeing success in other people.
Absolutely.
What is next for Apochromatik and you all?
I think it's continuing to expand the work as we work with more and more corporations and law firms. One of the things that is really fun is the programs where we're continuing, and so you can continue to see that transformation. So sometimes we'll come in and work with a team, and it'll be, a few months of let's address these issues, help them get to the next level. Maybe we'll come back next year for their offsite, but it's more of a contained situation, and that can be great. But when we're putting together a leadership development program and the firm says, you know what, it was so great last year, let's repeat it. We're going to make these tweaks because it's going to be a different group. Let's repeat it. That's great to really feel like the firm sees the value, the corporation sees the value, the participants see the value, and they want to do more. That's particularly fun. So I think we'll continue with that, and then we're about to launch our next 6-month attorney mastermind group.
Okay.
And working with those groups is so rewarding to see. They tend to be female lawyers, I think because of the community aspect, but to see lawyers who often start off thinking, I don't know what I want to do next. I got the gold stars, but it didn't get me everything I wanted. Now what?
Right.
That helping them then get the clarity and then put that into action, whether that's, I got to grow my book, I want to move in-house, I want to do something outside law, just helping them find that rewarding, fulfilling career that they went to law school for. That's really fun. Clarity
is such a huge component of that, right? Because without the clarity, it's really difficult to make decisions.
Yeah, I think it's so easy to slide along without making a decision, and everybody else is making the decision for you. And before you realize it, you are right where you didn't want to be.
Right.
And so I think helping people to get out of that day-to-day muck and really get perspective, that's really just a privilege to get to do that.
I love that. Amy, thank you so much for hanging out with me today and
Thank you,
sharing your
Susie.
journey. I've loved learning. I've known you for a while, but I've loved kind of digging in and and getting some of the goods from you. So I just thank you for being here. Where can people find you?
Well, first, I got to say, what you've done with Legally Blissed and really creating a space for women lawyers to focus on their development and learn and grow, I think it's just fantastic. Thank you. In terms of reaching out to me, I'm at amy@apochromatik.com. So, but when you 2 weeks later, you realize you have no idea how to spell Apochromatik, you can also find me on LinkedIn, Amy M. Gardner. There's several Amy Gardners, but Amy M. Gardner is where you can find me on LinkedIn.
Yeah. And on YouTube, there is a link to your website.
Thank you.
And on LinkedIn, there should be as well, because I went back and changed some things. So
thank you.
Thank you again for being here. And thanks for hanging out with Amy and I today. And I'll see you all on our next episode of Legally Blissed Conversations. Bye.